Hi, I'm Lynn Smith. I'm a professor of speech pathology and audiology at the College of New Jersey. My colleague is Farr, who was instrumental to me in actually making this type of assessment possible. So let me just give you the educational part of it. The College of New Jersey, of course, is, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It seems like we're all New Jersey people here. Mid-sized liberal arts school. Audiology undergraduate course is required. This is the course that we're going to be examining today and how we created the midterm and final exams for this course in audiology. It's an undergraduate course that's required for deaf and hard of hearing majors, students who want to be teachers of the deaf. That's what DHO stands for, deaf education and hard of hearing individuals. And my students who are speech pathology majors at the college. For this particular course, there are two sections, 34 students in each. Because it is a required course in both disciplines, deaf education and speech pathology, we get a lot of students needing to take this course. I traditionally gave midterms and final exams. So in the environment that we have for the past year, namely the virtual environment, attending classes through Zoom, the question came up, what about testing? What about exams? We like to think we trust our students to uphold academic integrity and, be honest and don't cheat. But the temptation is even greater now that we are sitting at home with all kinds of temptations to cheat. So this whole idea about recording students' answers came about from my rethinking academic integrity during the pandemic and test taking specifically. So in the Zoom classroom, it's very different than in the classroom, where in a classroom, students gaze over at each other's papers, or they'll sneak a peek at a cheat sheet they have hiding up their sleeve, or they will actually access their cell phone. Now, 34 students in a classroom, big classroom, it's fairly easy to conceal a cell phone, maybe on your lap, crossing your legs. I don't want to give away all the secrets here. But in a big classroom like that, with so many students, it can happen. So what might happen in that scenario is, maybe in a communication disorders class, for example, another class that I teach, question, essay type question, define AAE, describe it, and how we can offer alternative assessments to standardized testings with AAE students. So, of course, the AAE stands for African American English, all right? And in communication disorders, this is a topic that we discuss, and we talk about alternative standardized tests that can be offered and so forth, and that African American English is a communication difference and not a disorder. And it should be treated as a difference and not a disorder, and these children should not be recommended for speech pathology services and so forth, because they're very well understood in their communities and families. So in the regular classroom, face-to-face, person has a cell phone out and it's very well concealed, and they cannot remember what AAE stands for example. So they quickly Google it on the sneak, And the first thing that comes up in the search engine is not African American English, it's the American Academy of Endodontics. Okay, so clearly, this alerts us when we see this on the papers that they pass in a traditional classroom, that this student was not being honest, that how would they find that? So we have that issue. And that issue kind of carries over into the Zoom classroom. The Zoom classroom, maybe I have 35 or 34 pictures on my screen during an exam. I don't know what they have off screen. Maybe they have their textbook. Maybe they have their notes. Maybe they have their own cheat sheet. Maybe they have a spare iPad or phone where they can look up, for example, AA and come up with the same answer. Or maybe they even have somebody sitting next to them that's off screen, helping them with the answers. So the whole business about cheating in the Zoom classroom gave me pause to think about what are some alternatives to, just posting a multiple choice test, for example, on Canvas and having them submit the answers. So that was out, multiple choice questions, which, having so many students, a multiple choice exam, as you all know, is very fast to grade and, on to other things for us. But it just was not practical in this environment. It could not account for the temptations that are there to violate academic integrity. So instead, did away with multiple choice exams, and I created a list of 10 thought-provoking questions. Questions that contained questions about definitions. Whereas, maybe a multiple choice test would say, define this, A, B, C, or D. But in the thought-provoking open-ended essay question, they had to know what that definition was in order to respond correctly. So I developed in this particular audiology class 10 questions. 10 questions. They were told they could get these 10 questions, the pool of 10 questions, and that out of the 10 questions, 5 of those questions would appear the day of the final or the day of the midterm. Each day leading up, like after, mid-period, either, maybe middle of October when we're preparing for a midterm in late October, the students were given part of the class time, maybe 15, 20 minutes, to collaborate. If you've been using Zoom, you know all about breakout rooms. I like to call them collaboration rooms, where we would have our groups meet, and not always the same. I like Zoom to mix it up and randomly choose people for groups of 3. And they were given some time during class to collaborate with other students on coming up with good answers for this pool of 10 questions. Again, knowing that 5 of those would appear on the exam. So during that time, they would create outlines, bullet points, things they wanted to include in each of those 10 questions. The grading, we'll talk about that later. The benefits of preparing this way, the 10 answers, was that the students, first of all, had some socialization. You all know how difficult that's been during the pandemic. The idea of isolation, students not, seeing each other for coffee, or lunch, or, after class, just hanging out. That's all gone in this environment. So having even just 15 minutes of collaboration for this purpose, I like to use the collaboration rooms in every class for a bit of time for them to answer different questions that are apart from the exam. This is like on a every class basis. But for the exams itself, they would meet in the collaboration rooms for about 15, 20 minutes and specifically address these 10 questions. So they got to know each other. They got to discuss these ideas. They were not off camera. This is a big issue with Zoom. Students will check in at the beginning and they disappear. And you don't really know that until the end of class, when class is ended and their initial is still up there, right? I'm sure people have experienced that, where they just kind of disappear. In the collaboration room held in the middle of class, students are there. They want to get the answers to these 10 questions so that they can study. So the collaboration was very, very helpful. And as teachers, you all know how students learn from each other very well. They don't have the ability to kind of turn off their friends as they do maybe the teacher. So collaboration was just terrific. It also served to decrease test anxiety among students, which I feel, is sometimes out of control. Students are so concerned about testing, what's going beyond the test, how much is it going to count for, things like that, but what's going to be on the test. With this pool of 10 questions, they knew what the questions were ahead of time. And they knew that if they prepared, with the collaboration groups, if they prepared these 10 answers, they could do well. So the anxiety really was taken down a notch. And guess what? Taking down the anxiety gave them that much more headspace for learning the material and understanding it and coming up with good questions for me. And then, of course, preparing to speak their answers. Remember, this was requiring them to open up Flipgrid. Ellen's going to talk about Flipgrid. And press a button and actually start recording their answer, speaking their answer. So I had students come back and tell me, oh yeah, I studied with my roommate, or I studied, because a lot of them have these off-campus situations where they're renting apartments and things like that when they're not actually on campus. Anyway, they would study with their friends. They would study, boyfriends would quiz them. I encouraged them to make index cards with a question on the front and, outline bullet points on the back and actually just speak it. So in studying their answers like that, they really learned the material. They weren't memorizing answers. They were talking answers. So that was a big benefit, I think, too. Okay. So I guess Ellen's going to take over from this point, and this is how she made the magic happen.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay. So as Lynn summarized, we really wanted to provide an alternate means for assessing the students that would allow them to showcase their understanding of the material in an authentic way, and hopefully decline some of the possibilities of the academic integrity issues. So the technical considerations were that we integrated Flipgrid within Canvas. It is an LTI, so within the Canvas platform, the students did not need to access any outside tool. It was all contained within Canvas, which was really integral to making sure that the process was smooth. The way Canvas works, if you're not familiar with it, is you cannot embed an LTI into a quiz. So we set up assignments, individual assignments for each question. So the midterm and the final were both set up as individual modules with module groups with assignments within it. So there were 6 midterm questions, I believe, and 6 final questions, or 8, I don't remember exactly. So each grouping had, each question was an individual assignment. So to set it up, we went in, Lynn put in the question text, the prompt, and then we added Flipgrid as an external tool. So rather than students submitting an online submission, we selected external tool and selected Flipgrid. That connected Lynn's Flipgrid account to Canvas. We went into Flipgrid and we turned on moderation, which is a key feature that I want to make particular note of. If you don't turn on moderation in Flipgrid, then the other students can see their classmates' responses. So we wanted to make sure that only Lynn was able to see the responses for the exam. The students had 1 minute and 30 seconds of available recording time, but they were not limited to 1 minute and 30 seconds in opening the assignment and then responding. So they could open the assignment, they could read the question. It did not time out of the entire assignment after 1 minute and 30. They only had 1 minute and 30 in recording time available. Lynn and I talked extensively about whether or not we should place time limits on each question and ultimately decided against it. You can, if you're familiar with Canvas, you can set an available from an available to time to put parameters on a particular assignment. So let's say you only wanted the student to have access to this question for a total of 15 minutes. You could set that up so they'd have total of 15 minutes to read the question and make their 1 minute and 30 second recording. However, we decided not to put those parameters on for some equity issues. We weren't sure if students were going to run into any problems with technical connections, internet connections, etc. But mostly because the students had already had an opportunity to prepare the questions. So they were able to prepare the 10 in advance. I'm sorry, you did mention they had 5.
5, yeah.
Yeah, just senior
That's
moment.
okay.
So they did have that opportunity in advance. So they weren't walking into the test completely blind. So if they had prepared in advance, then they were going to be fine answering the question. So we decided not to put any kind of time restraint on the assignment, or rather individual question itself. But they did have the 1 minute and 30 second recording time, because we wanted them to be focused. We didn't want them just to ramble and keep talking and hoping that they were answering the question. So we wanted to make it as targeted as possible. And I do have an example of a student.
Cross-hearing is when sound enters one ear and then it travels through the skull to the other ear. Interaural attenuation is inter means between, aural means ear, and attenuation means reduction. So it is a reduction of intensity of a sound when it is traveling from one ear through the skull to the other ear. When your patient has a unilateral loss at 80 decibels, and a sound is presented at 80 decibels to his poor ear, and he responds to it, this is because the ear is hearing through the poor ear at 80 decibels, and then through cross-hearing, the sound is going through the skull to the other ear. But through interaural attenuation, the sound is being reduced by 40 decibels. 40 decibels is always consistent for interaural attenuation. So the good ear is really hearing the sound at 40 decibels.
So as you can see, she really articulated well the response to the question. She clearly had prepared. She could pause, collect her thoughts, and restart again, but you're not able to re-record in the Flipgrid setting. So it was just set to 1 minute and 30 seconds. Again, you could pause, collect your thoughts, and continue, but you didn't have the ability to re-record. I wanted to note also that Lynn was then able to grade all of the assignments through SpeedGrader. So she did not need to go into Flipgrid. She just simply went to the assignment and the videos appeared within SpeedGrader for her to be able to assess them. And I know she'll talk to you more about the grading and the student outcomes. So are there any questions about the technical aspects, or did you want to leave them to the end? Anyone, just check the chat.
I see a question. Did you ever consider or try an online proctoring service for exams? I did not. I did not. I don't know why. I just didn't.
If there's no technical questions about setting up, obviously, if it's something you're interested in doing, we can provide, you can send us an email or send me an email, and I can provide you some information on how we went about physically embedding the Flipgrid within Canvas. And that's actually on the Canvas site as well. So if you have that kind of technical question, I'd be happy to answer it. But Lynn, I'll pass it over to you about your student results.
Right. So when you saw the student, talking about this complex phenomena that we have in hearing, you saw that she was using her hands too. So having the video of her explaining the answer also added another dimension, that of body language, which was really another key that she was understanding what was going on. So did they like it? Yes, they did. They said the biggest benefit, I think, that I heard from students was that they really studied. They really studied for this. They collaborated with their friends. They practiced answering the questions. And in doing so, the way the questions were designed, they really seemed to get it. And I think even more importantly than the process was the comments that I got from students saying that they retained it. Particularly the student that was just featured here. I have her again this semester for another required course. And, I said, we're going to be using the same system. And I asked for comments about it, from people who had used it before, like she did. And she said, I was very anxious initially to do this. It's different. It's very different. And people don't like to be recorded and don't like how they look on the screen and all that stuff. But she said, I've got to tell you, I remembered all that information and I feel I have internalized that knowledge. And isn't that what we're trying to do here as teachers, is to get the students to internalize the information. All these students who want to go on to speech pathology or audiology, they have to go on to grad school. So I feel like I'm laying a good foundation for that.
And Lynn, if I can just interject for 1 minute, I want to mention the students did have an opportunity to practice with the platform before the actual exam. So Lynn had set up a practice assignment and everyone was required to go in and just post so that they had the familiarity of what they were going to be expected to do. So it wasn't a brand new tool on top of the some of the anxiety that surrounds this idea of a midterm or a final. So they did get to practice in advance and work out any of the kinks that they might have had. But there were no technical problems.
There were none.
Knock on wood, that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah, we should knock on wood because I'm doing it again this semester. But no, nobody, when we had the practice Flipgrid assignment during class time, nobody had a problem. They said, no, it was very user-friendly, which always amazes me when I try new things with students that involve technology. They just really get it. I think there is some kind of new hard wiring that's going on genetically for technical stuff, because these kids got it like 1, 2, 3. There was no problem. So I do think the responses I got from students about this method of testing were very positive, very positive. And not only does it keep them in class and not wandering off to do laundry or something while their camera is off, or whatever people do during Zoom. I know I've been tempted to do laundry, but that doesn't happen because you are now in a collaboration room, and your classmates need you and need your input for a little bit of time. And the test itself, again, all the benefits really outweighed the extensive time it took to grade them. I will say, though, in grading them, rather than flipping through paper upon paper or paper with these open-ended questions, and when you're reading essay answers, it can take a long time. I could close my eyes and listen to the answers. So it really helped with the eye strain for grading. It did take a long time, and it was mostly the time was spent manipulating between Canvas and then putting up the grade and then getting back, making sure that it was recorded, the grade was recorded on Canvas. So that was the time-consuming part, which was kind of, a no-brainer. But listening to the answers too, for me as an educator, was very rewarding, because I could see these students learned and did internalize the answers. It wasn't just, memorizing mnemonics of definitions or what have you. So all in all, I thought it was a very successful experience, and students have agreed. Okay, yeah, easier on the eyes. The setup, well, thanks to Ellen. Ellen can say simple. For me, it was like, how do you do this? This is magic. You are, unbelievable. But it did, if Ellen says it was simple, I guess it was on her end of things. But I can say it did work smoothly from my perspective, and certainly for the students as well. No technical issues. Yeah, they could not re-record, but the students got around that. They said, if I was answering a question and I thought I messed up, I stopped it right away and I restarted. And they would tell me that. They say, I've got 2 versions there, but please don't pay attention to the first one. I messed up, listen to the second one. And it was fine. A minute and a half is a long time to talk, especially if you have designed your answer and you know what you want to say. And it's just the facts, ma'am. And they did an awesome job. They really did. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I can't think of anything else to add. Can you, Ellen?
No, I think you covered it quite nicely.
Okay.
Be interested if there's any additional questions. Don't think there's any in the chat, but if anyone wanted to pop in and share their thoughts, or if anyone has tried a similar setup, we'd be interested in hearing.
I'm just revisiting the chats, and Elizabeth, you asked about proctoring a survey, exams and all that. I know they exist, don't get me wrong, but I never really considered it. After I had this light bulb go off about having them record their answers, I thought, no, I'm not going to have anybody, looking in on them. I know my own daughter had to take a standardized test recently from her bedroom, and she said she had to position her laptop a certain way. She had to scan around the room, and I thought, invasive. I don't like that. So, I don't know. Maybe you guys have had success with that, but I thought if we could record the students, then we don't need any big brother watching over them.
And I will say that Flipgrid was not what we thought of initially. We used Kaltura as a lecture capture system that the students also have access to, and you can embed Kaltura video into an assignment and into a quiz, but we were having difficulty figuring out an easy way for the students to then record using Kaltura. They're also able to use it as lecture capture, but we were having difficulty figuring out the best way for them to then submit it. And I had done some research, and I'd used Flipgrid in the past. And once I learned that you could turn on the moderate feature, that is why we decided to go with Flipgrid, because it integrated within Canvas, everything got saved, and only Lynn would be able to access the videos.
So if anyone else has any questions, you can pop on the screen or type it in there. I see Elizabeth responded. And I see Muriel just came on stage. Muriel, do you have a question?
I was just going to say that I use Flipgrid regularly since COVID for discussions in Blackboard. And at first, I kind of did it the way you did it, where I sent them to Flipgrid and they did the discussion there. Now I've learned that if they record their video in Flipgrid, you only need the URL. And they can copy the URL from Flipgrid and put it into an assignment in Blackboard. I don't know about Canvas, but and when I click on the URL now, it goes right to the Flipgrid video within Blackboard. I don't have to go back to the Flipgrid platform. But I would give a high five and an absolute that I love Flipgrid, and my students they all use it for their teaching, so they're used to it. And it's worked really well for me too. So I'm excited to try this. I haven't tried it as an exam yet. I've only done it as graded discussions. So I really like the idea of using it as an exam.
Yeah, try it, Muriel. I've had really good responses from the students.
I bet they love it, because most of them are much more anxious about an exam than to just be able to talk to you. And you know, back in the day, I remember doing like sort of oral, I don't want to call them exams, but oral, whatever, orals. And they would come to the office and talk about a subject, and that would be graded. And this is just so much easier.
Yeah, convenience. And I think I'm going to carry this through. Even if we are in person in the fall, which it looks like we will be, I think I might continue with this.
I would agree.
The test anxiety is way down, and I think the learning is much more robust and than it is if they just study for a multiple choice test, for example. So.
Thanks, Muriel.
Yeah, thank you.
So I had a question. What advice would you give to someone who's just considering starting this with their class, like maybe a class that they haven't done this at all with?
Well, I think from the teacher's point of view, the hardest part is getting started and getting the Flipgrid to work. So maybe Ellen, you could address that.
Yeah, I think that you need to make sure that you design good questions, that you make sure that they're questions that can be answered in a time frame that you are looking for. You know, I wouldn't replicate this for an essay question that, you know, to take up a 3 to 5 page essay that would result instead. That would be quite tedious to grade and to record. But the Flipgrid format is really made for very short responses. So very tight focused questions. And I really like questions that require an explanation. So it's not simply, you know, what does TCNJ stand for, the acronym, but maybe what are its values, you know, something that students get to describe what it is. I'd also just make sure that all students practice the platform well in advance of using the actual tool, and also discuss with them ways if they have concerns about recording in their home, because it is revealing some of the background that maybe they don't want to share. Now, the way Lynn had it set up is all the students took the exam at the same time. So you can decide whether or not you have the students' flexibility that they would take it during the class time, or if you're okay with them taking it at a different time, that might give them some flexibility. So if they are concerned about recording in their home, they might be able to go to another location if they're concerned about ambient noise or background. So there's broader considerations than just what are the questions and how are you recording it, but do your students have the bandwidth to maintain it? And do you have a backup in place in case they can't access the technology on the day of the exam?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? People want to, you can come onto the stage and ask your question, or you can type it in. Any closing thoughts?
We just appreciate the opportunity very much to share. We're very excited that this little experiment that we worked out so well. Lynn tried it first for the midterm in hopes that it would go well, and I'm glad to hear that she did again for the finals, using it again this semester, and then is also planning to carry forward when we are in person.
Yes, yeah. It was just so successful, and students liked it. And again, I cannot emphasize enough the learning. And, you know, if you do want to try it, you just practice using the Flipgrid and maybe doing a little session with your students and see how much they like it. You know, and it was a little anxiety provoking at first, as I mentioned. I didn't give my students a choice. I said, this is how we're going to do it. And you'll all learn it. You're all smart. You've got it up here. Let's go forward with this. And it really worked.